The topic for today's lesson is swing rhythm guitar. I'm going to go through the basics, considerations for both hands, and give you a few exercises to work on. Before we get onto it though, please check the description for a link to the PDF, and there's also there a link to my Patreon page where you can work on a standard each month and develop essential skills all related to your jazz guitar playing. Now, let's get onto it. For basic, no frills swing rhythm, I have two methods. Number one, the classic emphasis on 2 and 4. And the second one, a more mellow swing rhythm that I like to use for ballads. So this is just some basic approaches, and there's a lot more creative things you can do once you've got this solid foundation. My number one rule when it comes to playing swing rhythm guitar, well, any guitar for that matter, is to be free of tension and to be relaxed in both hands. When it comes to your fretting hand and your fretting chords, we don't want too much pressure. You don't want to work that hand too hard. If you do, notes will go out of tune, your chords won't sound right, and you could do yourself an injury over a longer period of time. The same applies to the strumming hand. You want a really loose grip of your plectrum, like you should feel like it's going to fall out of your grip at times. And you don't want a death grip. And also your forearm should be free of tension. If you grab that plectrum too hard, if you have tension in your forearm, then you're ultimately going to find it very difficult to play at fast tempos. And again, you could do yourself an injury if you're not careful. So let's go into the detail of what each hand is doing. So starting with the fretting hand, this hand is in control of three things for me. Firstly, the chord voicing, so what shape we play, what chord we're playing. Secondly, muting unused strings. So if you have a chord with 3 notes or 4 notes or even 5 notes maybe, then you're going to have unused strings which need to be muted. And thirdly, that hand is also in charge of the duration of the chord, so how long that chord sounds for. So that first one, the chord voicing, that will obviously depend on what jazz standard you're trying to play and work at your rhythm on. So, and that could be 3-note, 4-note chord voicings. Let's pick a context for today. Let's use the B section to Flying Home, which goes E flat 7 to A flat 7, and then F7 to B flat 7. So we're going to use these 4 shapes: E flat 7, A flat 7, F7, and B flat 7. So onto that second thing this hand's responsible for, the muting. Now, as you could just see, I've deliberately picked 3-note voice chords, which means you've got 3 strings to mute. That might give you a headache, because when I'm playing a swing rhythm, I want to mute those unused strings, because I can't be thinking about, missing certain strings as I change between chords. That's going to distract me from the single most important job of a rhythm guitar player, which, is swinging and keeping good time. So when I'm playing swing rhythm guitar, I'm pretty much always hitting 6 strings, and the fretting hand is taking care of muting unused strings. Now, muting is tricky, and I feel a lot of guitar players go one of 2 directions here, and you may be able to relate to this. You get the first group of guitar players which go, this muting is really hard. Instead of using a plectrum, I'm going to make my life a lot easier, ignore all that muting, and I'm just going to use my fingers to pluck the strings. And it's not to say there's anything wrong with that, but I think it's good to be able to do both, and I'll tell you why. The other group of guitar players sort out the technique, make it become habitual sort of part of their playing, and they never look back, and then they've got the flexibility to play with a pick or their fingers. The reason I think playing with a pick is important, well, I think muting is an important skill anyway, regardless of whether it's rhythm or lead. It's important to be able to control unused strings on the guitar. But also, if the guitar is being used to play rhythm and there's no drummer, then its role is not just harmonic, it's quite percussive too. You think of the music of Django Reinhardt, or early swing music where there's no drummer sometimes. The guitar's role there is as much just to lay down that percussive rhythm that you get. So, and I don't think you can do that easily without a plectrum. So that's my thoughts on that. So let's take each chord. On this E flat 7, there's 2 ways to mute the low E: with the finger on the A string or with the thumb. Now the way the index finger is there, it will rest against the B and the E string. I play more on the pad of my index so that it can lay against the other strings rather than it being super upright. And a tip here, when working on this, pick all 6 strings individually so that you can check what's going on. Check you have the notes you want, and then pick the muted strings more firmly so that you can feel the vibrations. Because if you're muting correctly, that you should feel the string that you're muting vibrating against your finger, and that tactile feeling of that vibration, you know, as well as the sound, I suppose, should be how you judge how well you're muting. On this A flat 7, we've got to mute the A string and the B string and the E string. And again, the way the index is coming over on the pad, not the tip, and then sort of arching over those strings at the bottom, it's going to catch those. And again, to mute a string, you just have to let part of your hand, part of a finger come into contact with the string. It doesn't need to apply pressure, otherwise you might get that note, that fret ringing. And the other 2 chords, F7 and B flat 7, are the same shapes that we've just used, so you would have the same muting considerations. On F7, you need to mute the low E, again either using the finger that's playing the note on the A string to do it, or use the thumb, and the B string and E string. And on that B flat 7, we've got to mute the A, and the B and the E, again, I'm using the index finger to take care of that. And as you work at this, you're obviously going to be very conscious of what you're working on, but really this just becomes a technical thing that becomes unconscious. And E flat 7, really, it's not, oh, this is where you put your fingers and play these 3 notes. It's, these are the notes I want, and I'm going to mute these 3 strings by doing this. And eventually it just becomes habit and the way that chord always comes when you play it. And the third and final consideration of the fretting hand is to control the duration of the chord. And we do this through what's called dampening, or you can think of it as squeezing the chord and then releasing the chord, because we want a little bit of daylight between each strum of the chord. Now, the majority of the time, our strumming hand is going to be hitting a quarter note 4 to the bar rhythm, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we don't control the duration of the chord, we're just going to get 4 long quarter notes ringing out. So what we want to be able to do is control the duration of the chord we're playing at any time. And let's think about having a long duration and a short duration. We're going to play 4 to the bar, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we want a bit of a gap between each chord, like I say, a little bit of daylight. How we dampen, how we control the duration, whatever chord shape you're playing, you release the pressure from the fretboard, and that pressure should be light anyway when you're playing your chords. And then you're still touching the string, but you will stop any vibrations, so the chord will be silenced, and you can control that duration. We could have a long strum like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again. Or a shorter strum, which is maybe like the idea of staccato. And then just doing that dampening, that release sooner. 1, 2, 3, 4. So long, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, versus short, 1, 2, 3, 4. That long duration is something I often like to do with ballads. I think it sounds nice and mellow. Now, the typical swing rhythm is a combination of long and short strums. And a simple way to think about it is long, short, long, short. So let's see if we can do that to Flying Home. So it's going to be, you know, 1 and 3 are going to be long, and 2 and 4 are going to be short. So long, short, long, short. again. So we've got the chord voicings, we've talked about muting, and we've talked about controlling the length, of our chords, long or short chords. So we need to talk about strumming now. And just recapping what I said earlier, it is essential to be relaxed and free of tension. No death grip of the plectrum, please. And also, no really sharp, wrist angles like that where you're gonna, cause yourself problems. And the wrist should be loose. It's like, I think of it like, if you shook out a match, that's the feeling I have when I'm playing swing rhythm guitar. In terms of using a plectrum, what plectrum? There's obviously many debates we could get into there, but I think most people wouldn't use anything that's under a thickness of 1 mil. But obviously it's something very personal, the choice of plectrum, and I always encourage people to experiment with different ones to try them out. This is probably obvious to you already, but where you strum will also affect the tone. You play closer to that neck, you get a warmer tone. Play closer to that bridge, you get a brighter tone. Most people go somewhere in between. My default is probably here, but if I was playing a gig, I might vary it throughout depending on the sound I want to achieve for the song I'm playing. In terms of volume, regardless of whether you're playing acoustic or electric, that is controlled by your strumming. If I'm playing electric guitar, then my archtop, then I will just leave the volume set, and if I want to go down in volume for a passage of a song, I will just strum with less attack. Now, returning back to the fretting hand, the long short, 1, 2, 3, 4 to the bar rhythm. What we're going to do to that now with the strumming is put a slight, and I mean slight, emphasis on the second and fourth beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, where I'm clicking my finger. You don't want to over egg this, it's a slight emphasis. You don't want it to sound like you're trying to hit a snare drum or something. And this is what that flying home B section would sound like with the slight emphasis on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want something like this where the accent on 2 and 4 is too much. So if we take what we've done so far, this can give you two basic ways of playing swing rhythm guitar. The first way would be just the 4 long strums. And say I like to use this for a ballad, say something like, or a mellow swing tune like All the Things You Are. And then we've got that swing rhythm where we have long, short, slight emphasis on the second and fourth strum. Now, what do you need to do with both of these? What you need to do is practice playing them in time and at different tempos, because swing rhythm particularly, there's certain speeds it will feel really great at. Others, trying to do it fast tempos too soon, it's going to just be, you're going to tense up and it's not going to feel good. Equally, trying to do it very slowly can be harder. It's good to experience it at different speeds. You could play to swing drum beats, just look up swing or swung drum beats on YouTube and you could play along to those. You could play along with the metronome set to click on just 2 and 4, so you can feel that where that emphasis needs to be. You could play along with records, but probably no substitute for really playing this with other people and accompanying others, whether that's playing with other guitar players, other instruments, singers. That's really where you learn to do this. Now, today's lesson has predominantly been very technical, about the technical aspects of playing swing rhythm guitar. There's obviously also the really important aspect, which is playing in time, learning to feel the beat and maintain a tempo. Not easy if you've not done this before, and that would be definitely something to work on once you get to grips with the technical aspects of this. For me, the most important thing when playing these kind of styles for others, for other soloists to play with the top of or singers, is keeping time and also maintaining a consistent sound, so that it doesn't distract from what they're doing. So if those are things you need to work at also, I'll put a couple videos up for you on the screen that would be good follows on from today's lesson. Don't forget, check the description for the PDFs from today, as well as a link to my Patreon page. Thank you to all of my patrons for supporting this channel, making these videos possible. It really does mean a lot and it helps me get out this content for you guys. Thanks as ever. Any questions, you leave them below. Jazz Guitar Lessons every Wednesday. Until next time, you take care.